Good morning. My name is Chris Fox, and today we're talking about how to write great characters. This is a topic I haven't visited in several years now, I think, and I've done some areas of it in the past, but I've learned a lot since then, and I think I can distill it down a little differently. So, there are three things to know about writing a great character. The first is that character needs to be sympathetic. And by sympathetic, I do not mean you need to sympathize with them. I mean, we as the reader need to understand why they are doing what they're doing, even if what they're doing is terrible. This applies to antagonists, this applies to protagonists, every side character. We have to understand why they're doing what they're doing. The more we understand about their motivations, the better. Second, they need to be competent. It is okay to have a character that is competent in one area and incompetent in other areas and can actually be quite funny if done really well. So I'm not saying they can't have flaws, but they need an area of competency. And this is especially true if you're writing anything in science fiction, fantasy, or a thriller. They need to have their area of expertise, their area ideally where they're as good or better than almost every other character. And this is why when you're looking at the hero's journey or Dan Harmon's story circle, you really are highlighting the ordinary world of the hero by showing where is this person competent. But remember that also needs to apply to other characters in the plot. So people need their various expertise. You need to know what it is that they are good at, and it has to be something. If the characters are mediocre at whatever it is they're doing, fans are not going to love it. It may not be something they're even consciously aware of, but we're reading this, we're reading stories in the same way our ancestors would listen to the oral myths of their tribe. You're learning about gods and heroes. You're learning about the exemplars of humans, and it's giving us archetypes to aspire to. That's sort of our goal. And then finally, if you are writing protagonists especially, and this one might be a little contentious, but I believe you need to make them likable. If they are likable, then they resonate far better than if they're not likable. And I'm not saying you can't do an anti-hero, and some anti-heroes are amazing. If you look at movies like Judge Dredd with Carl Urban, he's he's not terribly likable. He's super by the book and way too hung up on the rules, and that's just who Judge Dredd is, but it still works. Most other characters, having them be likable is going to score you points with the audience or the reader. And I think that's something we need to aspire to. And as an example today of how to do this right, I'm going to use Indiana Jones. And we're going to talk about all three movies. I think this is a great vehicle because I feel like most of us have seen this series. And if you haven't seen this series, you really should consider giving it a watch. They're fun movies. So we're going to go all the way back to Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark, which was one of the most important movies of my childhood, I would say. It really shaped me and my interest in archaeology at the time. Indiana Jones in this movie is sympathetic. We understand what he's doing and why he's doing it. And we see very quickly as you're going through this plot that Indy doesn't care about money. He cares about artifacts and believes they should be in museums. He wants to bring them back to museums from wherever they are and keep them out of the hands of people who would sell them for pure profit so they disappear into someone's private collection. That's very much what he cares about. And interestingly, if you look at then movies 2 and 3, they make some changes in movie 2. And I think that maybe Spielberg or whoever was doing the writing, they figured it out that wasn't necessarily the best idea. Because if you look at Temple of Doom, which is the second movie, Indy is after fortune and glory. You hear this used like 5 times in the movie, fortune and glory, kid. What is he going to get if he gets the Shankara stones, fortune and glory? Well, it sounds like he's interested in glory, and it sounds like he's interested in money, and this was totally absent in the first movie. It wasn't what he was after. He wanted to solve the mystery, understand the truth of these artifacts, and get them out of the hands of the people that would abuse them. So for those who haven't seen Raiders of the Lost Ark, some kind of a non-spoilery version is he's after the Ark of the Covenant, and believes that if he allows the Nazis to get their hands on the Ark of the Covenant, very bad things will happen. So it's not just that he wants to put it in a museum, he wants to keep it out of the hands of people who will abuse it. That's very, very sympathetic, and it also makes him a good person. So we're seeing number 1 and number 3 in my list. He's likable because we like his motivations, we understand his motivations because he's very sympathetic. We get what he's doing and why. And then the second bit we see throughout the movie, right from the very first scene, Indy is competent. He speaks multiple languages. He understands archaeology in multiple different nations. He understands a variety of cultures. He's very, very well read. He excels in every area that a field archaeologist would need to, especially one that's going into dangerous ancient ruins. They do a really good job of showing that. And that doesn't vary in the second movie. He keeps his competency, which is really, really good. But you start seeing the supporting characters are not nearly as good. So in the Temple of Doom, you have the love interest as Willie, and Willie is afraid to break a nail, doesn't want to be out in the wilderness, complains constantly, is incredibly vain, and so far as I can tell, has no real redeeming qualities. So she's sympathetic. You can understand why she's doing what she's doing. I knew a lot of women like that in my life, including my own stepmother. She was very much that way. Not the vanity part so much as the didn't want to break a nail, didn't want to go camping. So it was sympathetic, but was she likable? No. And you lose points because in the first movie, your love interest is a woman named Marion. And Marion, we completely understand her motivations. She's involved in this adventure because of her father. She wants justice effectively because Indiana Jones screwed her over a decade before. And we as the audience very quickly understand why she's doing what she's doing. That's lacking in Willie. Willie's forced into her circumstances, never really given a choice, and has no real character arc by the end of the Temple of Doom. But when you get to the last movie in the series, The Last Crusade, that's changed back. And I put this in air quotes, our love interest in that movie. Spoilers if you haven't seen the movies. She ends up being a Nazi spy. We find out she's working for the enemy, and she's not redeemed by the end. She's not likable at all. Like, she's clearly not someone that you think would be good. And the romance between her and Indy feels somewhat forced by the third movie. In the first movie, it's very tangential. You have two people that are going on an adventure and they happen to fall in love by the end of it. But in the second movie and the third movie, it's made a central plot point, which I don't think landed nearly as well, because in movies 2 and 3, the love interests aren't really that likable. In the second movie, Willie's incompetent and unlikable, and in the third movie, the love interest, she is competent, but she's not likable. So we're missing one of the ingredients. But if you look at Marion in the first movie, she's got all three. She's sympathetic, she is competent, and she is likable. And so it really, really lands. And that's true of other characters in the first movie, too. There's the sidekick, I guess you could call him Sala, who is facilitating the dig in Cairo that is very, very important for Indiana Jones. And he manifests throughout the third movie as well. So you get to see him again, and he's just a very, very strong character. Love that character. But a lot of the side characters in the second movie aren't memorable and don't have the three magical ingredients you need to write a great character, unfortunately. You get into The Last Crusade, they've clearly learned their lessons. Most of the side characters are really, really good. The interplay between Sean Connery as the father figure to Indiana Jones and Indiana Jones as Junior is just incredibly well done. At the beginning of the movie, we see Indy as a young man. We learn how he got his whip. We learn why he's afraid of snakes. And you see all of the things that make characters great, where we're getting to see that he's likable, we're getting to see that he's sympathetic, and we're getting to see that he's competent. So if you're doing all three of those things, and you're doing all three of those things for all of your characters, then your story is infinitely stronger. What's interesting is if you look at these movies on, let's say, iTunes or Amazon, you can look at search ranking results in the sense that they're going to come up in the order that they've been searched in. And the first movie is always rated as the Lost Ark. It's the first movie. It's the most popular. But the second movie, Temple of Doom, is not second in the list. The second movie in the list is The Last Crusade. Lots of people skip Temple of Doom and they go right to The Last Crusade because it doesn't have the strongest characters. And there are a couple of other complaints about the Temple of Doom. For one thing, it's gross. There are many, many scenes where the food that they eat is absolutely disgusting. Instead of in the first movie where you are using snakes, which aren't terribly disgusting, they could scare people, but they're not disgusting. You have insects all over the place and, chilled monkey brains and eyeball soup and all sorts of crazy stuff. So that was a flaw as well. But primarily where they missed the mark in the second movie, in my opinion, is the characters, because the characters are not following that recipe. Now, if you extrapolate outwards to other IPs and you look, you're going to find the character's sympathetic. I understand why they're doing what they're doing. They're competent. I can see that they're good at something. So you'll notice, especially your antagonists, they're not likable in a lot of cases, but they are very, very competent. And you can apply this to all the Marvel movies, pretty much all the old good Marvel movies we used to like, less so the modern stuff that's coming out. I think they've lost their way, and you can see the difference. I went to see the movie The Eternals, and the characters in that movie were god awful, absolutely god awful. I couldn't see any that had really any redeeming quality because they broke all three of these rules. They weren't likable, most of them. They weren't competent, a lot of them, and they weren't sympathetic in that I didn't understand what a lot of these people were doing and why. And that's critical to us as authors. You've got to get that across. In my current series, Heir to Atlantis, Mitch has a supporting cast of other people, and I've made very certain that each one of them has these three ingredients. So everybody on his team is extremely competent. They're sympathetic. We get why they're doing what they're doing. And they're all likable in one way or another. So that really carries through the audience, and they love that stuff. And it's okay to make your antagonist unlikable. In fact, that's almost preferable in some genres. If you're writing fantasy and you've got some sadistic evil warlord, the audience wants that bastard to be stopped, so they are cool with you having an unlikable character. If you look at Star Wars, Darth Vader, not terribly likable, but he's definitely competent and he's definitely sympathetic in the sense that we get what his motivations are and we know what he wants. He wants the plans to the Death Star so we can stop the rebellion. So we get right off the bat what his motivations are. That's really all you have to do for a good character, and from there, just flesh them out. Make them human. Give them flaws that a human would have. No one is perfect. If your character's perfect and they get everything without trying, that's a Mary Sue, and nobody likes reading about a Mary Sue. So make sure you sprinkle some flaws in for each of these people. They don't have to be huge flaws necessarily, but they do have to be present. And then give them some adversity. They've got to stumble occasionally and fall down and then dust themselves off and get themselves back up. All that latter stuff has more to do with plot, but it is going to inform your characters and how their character arcs work. So again, just to recap, make your character sympathetic. That doesn't mean sympathy. We have to understand why they're doing what they're doing. Make them competent, ideally really competent in most genres in a single area. They're really, really good at X. It could be really, really good at piloting. It could be really, really good at fighting and melee. It could be really, really good at magic. It could be really, really good at knowledge and research in a certain area as that's relevant to the plot. It can be really, really good at investigation. It really depends on what you're doing, but it has to be relevant to the plot. They've got to be good at something, which is why this is happening to them and not some other character. If your character is mediocre in their area of expertise, the reader starts to ask, why are we following this person's point of view? And they start to check out. And if they're unlikable, the last of our three trio, then people aren't going to like it as much in most circumstances. There are exceptions, but let's go with the rule. They're not going to be as strong as we see in Indiana Jones. And I'd encourage you to go watch those three movies. Go watch Raiders of the Lost Ark, The Temple of Doom, and The Last Crusade, and see if you agree with me. Look at the characters and see who's great and who's not. If I look at The Last Crusade, which is the last one that I watched, obviously, Sean Connery and the interplay between him and Harrison Ford is incredible and makes the movie. And if they had leaned more on that and kind of cut out the love interest, it probably would have been stronger overall. But instead, we have Indy breaking character and pursuing a love interest. He happens to be a ladies' man, but in the first movie, he never pursues Marion. He's not trying to get back with her romantically. It happens completely organically. And there's a bunch of students in his class. He's a professor of archaeology. So there's a bunch of young women in his class that are clearly in love with him. One of them paints "I love you" on her eyelids. But he doesn't bite. He doesn't go for any of that stuff. But in movie number 2, he pursues Willie. And in movie number 3, he pursues our Nazi chick. So it's a change in his character that doesn't work as well. And you want to keep consistent in that way. Keep their motivations pure and on point. In the case of Indiana Jones in the first movie, in Raiders of the Lost Ark, he was obsessed to the point where he screwed up his original relationship with Marion because he was chasing archaeological digs. And we sense that his career is more important to him than romance. They changed it, I think, because somebody in some boardroom somewhere said, hey, listen, we got to have a strong love story in this because people really thought the love story was good in the first movie. So know why your characters are doing what they're doing, make sure they stay on point through the book, and make sure you follow our checklist. And you're going to have stronger characters. If you agree or disagree, please let me know in the comments. If you have further questions about characters or about how to do character arcs, I'd be happy to answer those. Anyway, I'm going to get back to the writing. I am just about finished with the third book in the Heir to Atlantis series, going really, really well. I have new covers on the way. I have found a designer that I'm going with who kindly reached out to me, a guy named Dave. He does fantastic work. The first cover that he put together is so much better than anything I was able to do. So I'm on my way there, which is wonderful. Anyway, I'll keep you guys posted on that, but I am going to get back to the writing, and I will see you next week.